If you found this video enjoyable, please leave a like and hell, even subscribe if you want to. It only takes 2 clicks, and push that notification bell just to get the messages for my videos. That would be greatly appreciated. Dio Brando, a very interesting character in the universe of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, having an extremely long history in the franchise as being one of the most scary antagonists and being a very long-running antagonist, being in every part so far in the series. Needless to say, Dio is very important to the series, and if you have been a long-time subscriber, I have technically almost done a similar video to the premise of this one, the most terrifying stands in the world. But due to it being so early made in my channel's history, it's kind of almost like a beta version of what this video is going to become. That other video was just kind of discussing the world and just genuinely having a fun time talking about the world and its references and influences. Well, this video is more power scaling oriented with a mix of Dio involved as well. Due to the fact that, well, Dio Brando's kind of underrated, and Dio and the world almost in a sense, and I feel like that's genuinely a fault on my behalf and the community to a certain degree, because for whatever reason everybody likes to bring up GR, Silver Chariot, Requiem, Wonder Review, D4C Love Train, all these reality warping stands that just are ridiculously powerful. But I'll be real with you, King Crimson, both the worlds, and a plethora of other stands need some love too, and I feel like one of the major cases is Dio and the world. So this video of course is going to talk about them and just the grossly powerful Dio Brando and of course the world. So of course, starting in chronological order, Dio Brando. So of course, in part 1, Dio Brando is a monster of a character. Pre-vampiric mask, Dio is clearly shown to be an athletic monster, being able to play rugby pretty damn effectively, and already having a very good fighting experience well before even that. So overall, before the vampiric mask, he is a very, very powerful human being. And after an altercation with the Joestar family household, Dio gains his vampiric abilities. You could describe Dio as a prodigy beforehand, but after gaining his vampiric abilities, you are clearly shown that he is a monster of a character. Dio in early part 1 with his vampiric powers is easily shown to be crushing humans effortlessly with his powers, being described in later parts and even in this part to be an apex predator to humans. And being an apex predator compared to the monsters that humans are, Dio comes with a plethora of abilities. One of the earliest showings of a vampiric ability is Dio's monstrous strength. Dio is able to effortlessly bend steel, keep his weight up on a Y-axis for a long amount of time, and break walls effortlessly. And on top of that, Dio's agility and speed look like they've been enhanced greatly, not being anything like Mach speeds or supersonic, but just above a human's at least. By the way, that is a low ball. On top of that, it also looks like Dio's senses have also been greatly enhanced. While not being shown in part 1 very well, part 3 Dio is shown to have some type of superhuman hearing, and assuming that, we can also assume that a lot of his other abilities have been greatly enhanced due to the fact that vampires usually have a great sense of, full body manipulation. And probably one of the greatest, abilities that part 1 Dio has, at least in the early parts of part 1, is his blood-sucking ability, since it's almost like an automatic kill if he touches a human and sucks out their blood. In the later half of part 1, we see Dio have a lot more abilities on top of the ones that he already currently has. Probably one of the more terrifying ones is Dio's instant freeze technique, which was so powerful that when Dio froze his hand and collided with Zeppeli's arm instantly froze. And when helped by Jonathan to try to counter Dio's attack, that they were both no match for Dio because he is 5 times stronger than both of them. Dio would of course use this ability multiple times in the rest of the series, being probably one of Dio's most versatile weapons, being able to freeze any part of his body instantaneously to defend himself against Hamon. And to add furthermore upon that, the sole fact that Dio can resist against Hamon with his body, which is a direct counter to him, just shows how much of a powerhouse Dio is in early part 1, and a brilliant strategist at that too. And finishing off Dio's very powerful techniques and attacks, his laser eyes, which actually is just pressurized water, fun fact, which is, kind of weird, and just shows you that Dio has like weird manipulation of his body. These eyes are so powerful they can break through stone pretty effortlessly, and we didn't get to see much of it, but it's most likely assumed, at least by me, that these things can probably do a lot more damage than that, because they can go through Jonathan pretty pretty effortlessly, and walls too, so most likely these things can do a lot of damage. And fun fact, is probably the only thing that gives Dio range in part 1. Now, what can be more impressive than freezing your limbs instantaneously and shooting lasers out of your eyes? Well, hyper regeneration, of course. Dio has been shown to have such good regeneration that fire literally has no effect on him, even if it's all over his body. Usually on average, house fires tend to be 1,000 degrees, so assuming that Dio is 1,000 degrees and is able to tank that pretty effortlessly and regenerate at a speed which he looks normal at, means that he is a monster when it just comes to just health regeneration. Now remember, that was an early feat in early part 1. Later in the series, Dio just straight up just reattaches his limbs effortlessly, straight up grabbing his limbs with his veins and just reattaching them forcefully. To the point where if Dio were to be cut directly in the head, basically cleaved in two, he can just simply put himself back together again, against a Jonathan who has the power of Hamon from Zeppeli within him, fighting him basically near equally. I would personally slightly say Dio was technically in control most of that fight due to the fact that, you know, his abilities are grossly overpowered compared to Hamon's, and because Dio is an excellent strategist, he was more or less in control of that fight for a majority of it until the very end, where Jonathan did pull out some shenanigans, I would say. Now, Dio does have a few obscure abilities, that being flesh manipulation, flesh buds, and hypnosis. Most of these are pretty unknown except for flesh buds, which are of course just strands of Dio's hair that have been manipulating people. That's more or less, that's all we know about flesh buds. The other two are just assumed to work. Hypnosis clearly seems to be only working on individuals of low intellect, and flesh manipulation might be some type of vampiric body manipulation that Dio can forcibly put upon someone else. So that's all we genuinely know about these abilities. The greatest Dio feat in part 1 has to be at the very end, where Dio is literally just a head and veins. He proceeds to fight Jonathan Joestar and put him in a corner, using the nearby environment to his advantage. He successfully kills Jonathan Joestar and then proceeds to survive a small steamboat explosion while only being ahead, and successfully gets back into his coffin somehow, thank you Araki. Now, taking a little detour into part 2, you can debatably say, and most likely in my opinion say, that Dio is most likely the strongest vampire in the entire series. Using previous examples I've already said, Dio has a plethora of abilities far above any vampire that was shown in part 2 and onward, definitely making Dio one of the strongest vampires, most likely the strongest vampire in the series. This is mostly because Dio has been shown the most and has the most abilities that effectively work, not to mention that most of his abilities affect Hamon users pretty well. And finally, part 3, Dio and the world. In early part 3, you can debatably say that due to having Jonathan's body full of Hamon, Dio is at an extremely weakened state, and without the world at his side, you can debatably say this version of Dio, at least at the beginning of part 3, is the weakest version of Dio with a vampiric boost. This weakness, of course, will be passed down onto Dio and the world, because Dio in part 3 does not show any of his more complicated and powerful vampiric powers he had back in later part 1, meaning that he doesn't have laser eyes nor instant freeze, and a much more weaker regeneration, on top of not having full body manipulation on the levels of later part 1 Dio. Now, it does sound like I'm dogging on part 3 Dio a lot here, but the fact of the matter is, part 3 Dio is debatably the strongest version of Dio. Now let me explain. Part 1 Dio is either 10 times or 15 times stronger than the average human, and even on top of that, a Hamon user. When Dio has the world, he is at least slightly edging over Jotaro and Star Platinum, being slightly stronger and faster than them both. Now, if you did watch my video on Star Platinum, you would know that Star Platinum at least scales to town level, due to the fact that Silver Chariot was able to block rays from the sun, which are equivalent to town level AP. And guess what? Jotaro fought Silver Chariot and won, and if A is greater than B, that would also assume that A is greater than C. Also, to mention the fact that Jotaro literally compares Star Platinum and the world as being literally the same, so just pointing that out too. Due to this feat alone, you could literally effortlessly say that Dio in part 3 is greater than part 1, like definitely due to the world, because literally part 1 Dio has no feats coming close most to the world. Also, to add upon this, time stop, you know, one of the greatest powers in JoJo, just pointing that out there. The world has the ability to stop time at the beginning of the fight with Jotaro at a maximum of 5 seconds, and eventually later being shown to stop time after Awakened Dio shows up to 9 seconds. And when Jotaro stops time temporarily, Dio still continues to move after his maximum 9 seconds, meaning that Dio still has enough stamina and potential to move even further. It is also stated in part 6 that Jotaro literally moves at light speeds with Star Platinum when he punches and attacks, meaning that most likely a Jotaro in top physical condition in part 3 means that most likely and definitely part 3 Dio with the world moves at light speed verbatim. Now remember, this is all base Dio. We have not even gone into Awakened Dio. Pre-Awakened Dio, you can definitely say that Dio is still a monster of a character with his limited vampiric abilities, having at least a semi-good regeneration compared to at least part 1, and still having some okay vampiric powers. But after drinking the blood of Jonathan Joestar, he gains a great power boost. Panels show that Dio's regeneration is clearly much better than what it was previously, but it does not look like he's gained his other vampiric powers, but at least being at a part 1 early Dio level is still incredibly good. Also, to not mention the fact that time stop gets increased, and you could maybe assume, depending on your interpretation of the panels, the world got a bit stronger due to Dio's awakening. More than likely, after the Joseph Joestar buff that is Awakened Dio is somewhere around 2 to 5 times more stronger than he previously was. Overall, at the end of part 3, Dio is a monster of a stand user and vampire, having one of his greater strength feats, having the world and a much better regeneration factor. Yeah, he's a monster. Like, definitely do not sleep on Dio whatsoever. Like, Dio solos most of the parts. Like, I'll be real, he is able to slap a lot of the villains without power boosts pretty effectively. Like, Dio is not to be underestimated in any fight. Just I'm pointing that out there. For the people that like to not mention Dio at all, you need to, because he's a monster. I'm just pointing that out. Like, look at the facts here. And put on your hypothetical goggles just for a little bit, because I'd like to point out something that Araki said about part 3 Dio, and just Dio and the world in general. Araki states in JoJo 6251, had he not died, the period during for which Dio could have stopped time would have grown continually, seemingly indefinitely, meaning that Dio at one point or another with his stand and himself would have grown to a point where he could stop time for literally forever, meaning infinitely, showing that Dio's potential is literally limitless in terms of the world. And in a so-called stalemate fight in JoJo, if somehow a stand user could even rival Dio, would most likely overpower him through time. Overall, Dio's a beast, don't sleep on him whatsoever. Well, that is going to be the end of the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. See you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.